Imagine walking into your own bathroom. You reach for the can of air freshener, an action you've performed, I don't know, 1,000 times without a second thought.
Right, it's just completely automatic.
Exactly. But today, your hand stops because wrapped tightly around the middle of that aerosol can is a thick piece of gray duct tape.
Okay, that's already a little intense.
It is. And written across that tape in this large, aggressive black marker is a single, uncompromising instruction. It just says 1 second.
Wow. So, wait, you're only allowed to spray it for 1 second.
Yep. You are no longer allowed to spray the room until it smells nice. You are granted exactly one second microburst.
And the friction there doesn't just stop in the bathroom. I mean,
Yeah.
if you walk into the living room of this house, you reach for a tissue, and you discover that someone has literally taken a heavy-duty paper cutter to the box.
Wait, a paper cutter?
Yeah, they physically sliced the entire stack of tissues completely in half.
Oh my goodness.
So every time you need to wipe a spill or, blow your nose, you're forced to use this mutilated half-sized piece of paper.
Now ask yourself, what kind of financial crisis forces a household to micromanage a pressurized can of air and to, physically destroy their own hygiene products just to double their lifespan?
I mean, you'd immediately picture some kind of catastrophic event, right? Like a sudden job loss or massive insurmountable debt or maybe a huge medical emergency.
Right, something life-altering. But the reality we are looking at today in this deep dive is far more common, and honestly, it's much more complicated to untangle.
It really is.
Because all of these extreme microscopic sacrifices, the duct tape, the half tissues, even cutting a single piece of morning toast in half, they are all happening to fund one very specific, highly protected habit.
5 cigarettes a day.
Exactly, 5 cigarettes a day. Welcome to our deep dive. What we have today is a truly remarkable piece of source material.
Yeah, it's essentially this highly analytical, first-hand financial diary. It's written by someone who found themselves observing their parents' household budget just slowly buckling under the weight of a single, unyielding expense.
The mission for this deep dive is to carefully unpack this author's story from beginning to end. We are going to examine the actual mechanics of how one protected expense cascades through an entire family's daily life.
And how it alters almost everything they touch.
Right. We'll look at the psychological toll of all that friction. And then we're going to break down the highly unconventional, surprisingly mathematical, and honestly, ultimately bittersweet solution the author engineered to fix it.
We're basically going to analyze the structural integrity of a family budget when raw logic collides with deeply ingrained human behavior.
I love that way of putting it.
It's a brilliant case study in resource management, behavioral friction, and the really complex ways families negotiate their limits.
So, if you are listening right now, whether you are currently, attempting to audit your own household expenses, or if you're just simply fascinated by the intricate, often irrational ways we assign value to things, stick with us.
Because this narrative offers an incredibly vivid, almost forensic look at the extreme lengths people will go to preserve the things they love.
Let's dive straight into the catalyst of this household crisis. The author identifies the core stressor right at the top of the text, and they give it a title that immediately establishes its dominance.
They call the mother's smoking habit the king of luxury goods.
The king of luxury goods. That phrasing is so crucial, isn't it?
Absolutely. By crowning it a king, the author immediately establishes a clear hierarchy within the household ledger.
Yeah, it's not just another item on the list.
Right. This isn't a casual negotiable line item. It is the reigning monarch of the budget, and every single other expense is totally subordinate to it. The author actually notes that many people view tobacco as the ultimate bottleneck in household finances.
And they make a very sharp distinction about why that is, bringing up the Japanese concept of kiritsumo.
Which is such an interesting concept to apply here.
For those who might not be familiar, kiritsumo is the idea that dust accumulates into a mountain, meaning, small, unseen expenses eventually pile up into significant debt over time.
Like buying a coffee every day without thinking about it.
Exactly. But the author argues that tobacco completely defies the kiritsumo concept. Tobacco is not an accumulation of dust. A single box is visibly, immediately expensive.
Right. It is a pronounced and undeniable drain on resources that you have to actively choose to purchase every single time you run out.
And to illustrate just how tangible that drain is, the author provides this brilliantly clear visual equivalent. They state that one single pack of cigarettes is equal to exactly 5 plates at a conveyor belt sushi restaurant.
Which fundamentally transforms how we and how the author understand opportunity costs.
Yeah, it makes it so real.
Because when you're just analyzing a spreadsheet, an expense is just a sterile number. It's just math. But the author refuses to let the expense remain abstract like that.
It becomes a visual currency exchange rate. The author isn't looking at a pack of cigarettes sitting on the kitchen counter and just seeing a collection of paper and dried leaves.
No, they're looking at that small cardboard box and seeing 5 plates of sushi spinning by on a conveyor belt.
They see the tangible loss of a family outing. A shared meal, a moment of joy, literally materialized right there on the table. Every single time the mother buys a pack, the family is actively not going to the sushi restaurant.
That framing forces such a heavy emotional weight onto the transaction. When you are managing a highly restricted budget, you aren't simply making isolated purchasing decisions. You are constantly choosing what you are willing to forfeit.
Right, it's always a trade-off.
Exactly. And by equating the cigarettes to this classic accessible form of family entertainment, the unseen cost becomes painfully, visibly obvious.
We also need to establish the specific context of this family dynamic because, I mean, the immediate reaction from anyone on the outside looking in is usually just, well, just force her to quit.
Of course, that's the logical leap everyone makes.
But the author lays out a set of conditions that makes this impossible. The mother is in her mid-60s. She has been smoking since she was young. This isn't some new vice she picked up last year.
It is a lifelong companion for her.
And we must note the compromise she has already made. The text indicates she has reduced her intake to just 5 cigarettes a day.
Which is important to highlight. In the realm of smoking habits, 5 a day is a significantly reduced footprint. It really demonstrates that she has made a genuine effort to curtail the expense.
And the author recognizes that effort. This is where the profound empathy of the text really shines through.
Yeah, it's not a resentful text at all.
Not at all. The author explicitly states that, considering this is her entertainment for her twilight years, they actually want her to continue enjoying this hobby. There is no moral grandstanding about the habit itself.
They aren't lecturing her about health.
Exactly. The author genuinely believes the mother will be happier if she can just keep smoking her 5 a day. The goal of this family is not elimination, it is accommodation.
But that accommodation collides violently with the economic reality of the household.
Because the family relies entirely on the father's fixed income.
Right. The text describes the financial situation as strict, like a very tight squeeze. Furthermore, the author notes that the mother, quote, won't go to part-time work.
So there is absolutely no avenue for her to generate new capital to fund her habit.
None. So we are looking at a completely locked system. We have an immovable ceiling, the father's single income. We have a protected, non-negotiable asset, the mother's daily 5 cigarettes, which the family fundamentally wants her to have. And we have a flat refusal to expand the income pool.
When you have a protected asset in a locked financial system like that, the required capital has to be aggressively extracted from the surrounding environment.
Yes, exactly. If the money cannot come from new labor, and it cannot be negotiated away from the tobacco budget, it literally has to be cannibalized from the family's basic standard of living.
Which brings us to arguably the most visceral section of the author's diary, the extraction process.
It's a tough read, honestly.
It is. The author describes this phase not as some sudden collapse, but as the slow, agonizing erosion of daily quality. They write that, quote, as the number of sighs increases, the grade of daily necessities visibly drops.
I want to focus on that word for a second. The inclusion of the word size serves as this incredible auditory metric for financial strain.
Oh, that's a great point, an auditory metric.
It suggests an environment entirely devoid of explosive arguments, right? It's replaced instead by the quiet, heavy resignation of people who are constantly encountering their own limits.
A sigh is the sound of a system under immense pressure.
Beautifully put.
Let's analyze the mechanics of this pressure because the author catalogs the downgrades in an incredibly detailed observational log. This isn't just a vague complaint about times being tough. This is a forensic accounting of domestic sacrifice.
It really is an itemized list of suffering.
We started the deep dive with the tissues, but let's look closer at that specific intervention. The author notes they moved from standard box tissues to cheaper refill packs.
Now, that initial step is standard frugality. You eliminate the premium paid for the cardboard packaging. It requires very little actual behavioral change.
Right, you just put the plastic pack in a reusable container or something. But the next step is where it crosses into systemic friction, taking a literal physical paper cutter and slicing the stacks of tissues in half before anyone is allowed to use them.
The introduction of manual labor to enforce a budget is a huge escalation. They are physically altering a basic sanitation product to artificially extend its lifespan.
Consider the daily psychological friction that creates.
It's immense. Every single time a family member spills a drop of water or needs to blow their nose, they are forced to reach for a deliberately mutilated, inadequate piece of paper.
It transforms a mundane action into a constant, tactile reminder of their financial constraint. It's impossible to ignore.
You can't just casually use a tissue. You are confronted by the budget every single time you touch one.
And this erosion of sanitation standards becomes even more pronounced when we look at their dental care. The author documents that disposable dental floss was replaced by interdental brushes.
Which, again, might seem like a normal swap at first glance.
Right, but the crucial detail is that these brushes are not thrown away. The text states they are, quote, washed and used many times.
Oof. That crosses a really critical psychological boundary.
It really does. Moving from single-use hygienic products to multi-use, manually washed hygienic products requires a fundamental shift in how a family views personal care and sanitation.
Just think about the sheer time and careful effort required to wash a tiny, fragile interdental brush so it can survive a third or fourth use. It demonstrates an extreme, almost desperate level of resource guarding.
It feels like an environment where the entire concept of convenience has just been completely eradicated.
Totally gone.
And that brings us back to the bathroom spray with the duct tape. We mentioned it in the intro, but let's really unpack why that specific visual is so powerful. Wrapping tape around a can and writing 1 second in large letters.
It is a textbook example of hostile friction design, but implemented in a domestic setting.
Hostile friction design, wow. Explain that a bit more.
Well, spraying air freshener is largely an unconscious, automatic action. You don't plan it out, you just do it. The family is attempting to regulate that unconscious behavior through direct, aggressive visual instruction.
Because they can't trust themselves to self-regulate.
Exactly. It speaks to the utter desperation of trying to plug, and the clear water in the present is a stark visual indicator that those days are gone.
The aesthetics of poverty really start to permeate every single room. Moving to personal care, the author notes the cotton swabs were replaced with cheaper versions where the stick part is, in their words, flimsy.
Which introduces yet another sensory reminder of their predicament.
Yeah, a cotton swab requires structural rigidity to actually function.
Right. When you downgrade to a flimsy alternative, the product bends, it fails, it irritates the user. Every single morning while performing basic hygiene, the family members are physically reminded that their household cannot afford the structural integrity of a tiny piece of plastic.
It is a persistent daily annoyance born entirely out of the necessity to fund the mother's tobacco.
It's just relentless.
And then the sacrifices across the threshold from external household goods to actual internal nourishment. The kitchen becomes the front line of this budget war.
This is where it gets really serious.
The author notes that the parents begin eating only half a slice of bread for breakfast.
We have now moved from degrading comfort to deliberately restricting caloric intake.
Yes. And the author is highly aware of how alarming this sounds, so they add a clarifying parenthetical note in the blog post. They write, quote, which would be fine for a diet, but, well, they kind of trail off, making it unequivocally clear to the reader that this is not a health initiative.
The parents are not managing their carbohydrates. They are literally having their physical sustenance to balance the ledger.
The visual of an older couple sitting at a breakfast table, silently agreeing to consume exactly half a slice of toast each, is profoundly moving.
It really demonstrates how deeply the parents have internalized the economic pressure. They have ceased cutting back on peripheral goods and have begun cutting back on their own biological needs.
And the downgrades in the kitchen continue. The author notes the milk was switched to a brand featuring packaging that is, quote, obviously cheap-looking.
Again, the focus on aesthetics.
Yes. They don't mention a drop in nutritional quality or taste. The focus is entirely on the visual presentation. The package looks cheap.
Which just reinforces that persistent psychological weight of their situation. Every time the refrigerator door is opened, the family is confronted with packaging that loudly broadcasts their financial struggle. There is zero visual relief in that house.
The final item on this relentless list of downgrades might be the quietest, but honestly, I think it's also the saddest. The author notes that the parents completely stopped drinking coffee.
Wow. Just completely stopped.
And the reason given is that they stopped, quote, out of consideration for the cost.
If we trace the trajectory of this whole list, we begin with the somewhat absurd taking a paper cutter to a stack of tissues, and we end in deep melancholy.
Yeah, it gets dark.
Surrendering a morning cup of coffee isn't merely about saving the cost of the beans. It is the absolute surrender of a daily ritual, a primary stimulant, a moment of adult comfort.
And that phrase, out of consideration, it implies this silent mutual pact between the parents to just absorb more suffering so the household system doesn't collapse entirely.
They are shielding each other through mutual deprivation.
I have to pause here and just channel you, the listener, for a moment. If you are listening to this cascade of downgrades, if you are picturing the half toast, the flimsy cotton swabs bending in your ear, the taped air freshener, the overwhelming urge is to just scream at the structural flaw.
Right, the obvious solution.
Why wouldn't someone, anyone in that house, just look at the mother and say, "The system is broken. We are eating half rations of bread. The smoking has to end today."
It is the most rational response from an external, purely logical viewpoint. I mean, if a single variable is causing systemic failure, you just remove the variable.
But we must return to the foundational premise the author established at the very beginning. The family operates under the shared consensus that the mother's happiness, derived specifically from those 5 daily cigarettes, is a load-bearing pillar of the household's emotional stability.
The goal of the family unit is not to eradicate the mother's joy for the sake of a whole piece of toast.
Exactly. The goal is to engineer a reality where both the joy and the toast can coexist.
It is a staggering feat of collective endurance, really. They are actively choosing a life of microscopic friction and mild malnutrition just to protect a specific indulgence out of love.
But, as the author points out, the list is endless. The sighs are multiplying. The behavioral friction of the flimsy swabs and the multi-use dental brushes is pushing the system to a breaking point.
The author realizes that simply managing the decline of their daily necessities is no longer viable at all. They must confront the king of luxury goods directly.
But they face the ultimate paradoxical constraint. How do they reduce the financial burden of the bottleneck expense without actually eliminating the expense itself?
Which feels like a completely unsolvable riddle. How do you save money on tobacco without actually reducing the amount of tobacco consumed?
And this is where the author's narrative takes a massive, brilliant left turn. To solve this deeply intimate, microscopic household crisis, the author draws inspiration from a very famous story about a young Jeff Bezos.
The founder of Amazon. It is such a wildly unexpected mental leap to make while you're staring at a half piece of tissue paper.
It really is. Let's lay out the Bezos connection because it serves as the philosophical turning point of the entire document.
No, let's go through it.
The author recalls an anecdote about Jeff Bezos' childhood. The story goes that a young Bezos, who was already displaying, this prodigious talent for mathematics, was riding in a car with his grandparents.
Okay, setting the scene.
And his grandmother was a heavy smoker. Bezos, ostensibly wanting to help his grandmother, decided to run a calculation right there in the car. He determined the health impact of smoking, calculating that every single puff of a cigarette shortened a person's life by a specific metric in this telling of the story, 5 minutes.
So he calculated the ultimate output cost of the habit.
Yeah.
Actual time and mortality.
Right. And young Bezos, clearly proud of his mathematical deduction, presented this grim calculation to his grandmother.
Just laid it out for her.
The implication is that he wanted to use the stark, undeniable reality of math to shock her system, essentially saying, every puff costs you 5 minutes of your life, with the clear intent of forcing her to quit for her own survival.
He weaponized the mathematics of mortality. He attempted to use guilt and fear as the primary levers for behavioral change.
Now, what makes our author so perceptive is how they analyze this Bezos anecdote. They look at Bezos' approach, they look at their own mother smoking her 5 allocated cigarettes a day, and they make a conscious, strategic decision to reject the Bezos method entirely.
That is a profound pivot.
The author literally writes that they, quote, chose the opposite path of Bezos.
The author understands a fundamental truth about human behavior that young Bezos simply did not. Using guilt to attack a deeply ingrained habit usually just triggers defensive entrenchment.
If the author presented the mother with health statistics, it would only induce shame, which totally runs counter to their primary goal of letting her enjoy her twilight years.
Exactly. If Bezos used math to generate guilt, the author decides to use math to generate efficiency.
Let's think of this as the efficiency pivot. Instead of attacking the mother's habit, the author decides to audit the waste produced by the habit.
This completely shifts the author's role. They go from being a passive victim of the budget to an active systems analyst. They focus entirely on the input, the raw material actually being consumed.
And the author becomes incredibly clinical about this. They describe initiating a process of rigorous physical data collection.
Yeah, this part is wild.
Specifically, the author begins physically inspecting the mother's ashtray, collecting and analyzing her discarded cigarette butts. The text uses the term shikamoku, which is the Japanese slang for butts.
Picture the reality of that action for a second. The author is meticulously sifting through ash and discarded filters.
It is an act of forensic investigation driven purely by desperation and familial loyalty.
They are hunting for inefficiencies in the biological and mechanical process of the mother's smoking routine.
And what they discover in that ashtray is the structural flaw that changes absolutely everything. The author finds that the mother is leaving a massive amount of unburned tobacco behind.
Really? How much?
The text notes that sometimes she extinguishes the cigarette with a full third of the tobacco remaining. Sometimes she throws it away with fully half of the tobacco completely unsmoked.
That is a staggering revelation of behavioral waste.
If we go back to the author's visual currency exchange rate, the mother is essentially taking 5 plates of conveyor belt sushi, eating 2.5 of them, and throwing the rest directly into the trash.
She is throwing away the coffee they sacrificed.
Exactly.
To use a mechanical analogy, it is like inspecting a car engine that is running far too rich. The engine, the mother's habit, is consuming massive amounts of premium fuel, but it isn't burning it efficiently at all. It is spewing raw, unburned fuel right out of the exhaust pipe.
That's a perfect analogy.
The author realizes that the mother's allowance of 5 cigarettes a day does not equate to 5 fully consumed cigarettes.
She's just seeking the psychological comfort of the ritual, the lighting of the match, the initial inhalation, the tactile sensation of holding it.
But she is discarding a massive percentage of the physical product before its utility is actually exhausted. The king of luxury goods is operating at 50% efficiency.
Armed with this data, the author runs a simple calculation that immediately solves the household crisis. They realize that if they can just alter the mother's behavior slightly, if she simply smokes every single cigarette all the way down to the base of the filter before extinguishing it, the monthly cost of the tobacco is instantly cut in half.
By optimizing the consumption of the raw material, she can satisfy her cravings using fewer actual cigarettes, or at the very least extract 100% of the value from the product the family is starving themselves to purchase.
It's a total paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And the author moves swiftly right into the execution phase. They don't just gently suggest this to the mother. They implement it as a strict, non-negotiable household protocol.
They enforce maximum efficiency.
The author even mentions that when there were leftover hand-rolled leaves, they started recycling those round and round. Absolutely nothing is permitted to be wasted. The tobacco is utilized to its absolute maximum potential.
They successfully optimize the bottleneck without actually eliminating the asset. It's brilliant.
The author is so deeply triumphant about cracking this code that they bestow this magnificent, dramatic title upon their solution. They write in the text, quote, "It started, it's done. Reversal technique. Underworld, endless smoke. Bye-bye."
It reads like a special move from a battle manga. The sheer exuberance of that title is just wonderful.
You can feel the euphoria in those words. They were slowly drowning in a sea of flimsy cotton swabs, half toast and heavy sighs.
Yeah.
And through pure clinical observation and data collection, they found the unburned fuel, fixed the leak, and executed the reversal technique.
It really showcases the incredible ingenuity that can only be born out of severe restriction. When a family is trapped between a fixed income and an immovable expense, they are forced to look inward, scrutinizing the microscopic details of their daily existence.
Most people would look at an ashtray and see only refuse.
But this author looked at an ashtray and discovered a hidden reservoir of capital.
So the efficiency is unlocked, the reversal technique is active. The obvious next question is, what actually happens to the newly liberated capital?
Right, what is the tangible payoff for this massive behavioral shift?
To understand the impact of the payoff, we must review the exact mathematical breakdown the author provides in the concluding section of the text. They lay out the ledger with complete transparency.
Let's walk through that math, because seeing the hard numbers really validates the entire struggle.
Okay, so the author calculates the baseline cost first. It's 600 yen per pack of cigarettes. They multiply that 600 yen by 31 days to establish a total monthly baseline cost of 18,600 yen.
That 18,600 yen is the crushing weight that was forcing the family to water down their lives and tape their air fresheners.
Exactly. Then they apply the reversal technique. By enforcing the rule that the mother must smoke down to the filter, wasting zero tobacco, they effectively divide that total monthly cost by two.
Therefore, 18,600 yen divided by 2 results in a definitive monthly savings of 9,300 yen.
9,300 yen. That is the physical, mathematical reward for analyzing the discarded shikamoku. Now, the critical decision is how to deploy that capital. Do they put the 9,300 yen into an emergency savings account? Do they finally buy whole tissues and structurally sound cotton swabs?
This is where the narrative takes a deeply beautiful and highly revealing turn regarding the family's core values. The author states explicitly in the text, quote, "There's no need to save the spared money."
I find that line so compelling, there's no need to save.
Instead of hoarding the 9,300 yen to build a financial buffer or aggressively pay down unseen debts, they choose to inject that capital directly back into the family's immediate quality of life.
The author documents that, alongside their heavily regimented once-a-month trip for conveyor belt sushi, a new phenomenon began. They write that, quote, irregular steak dinners started appearing.
Think about the whiplash of that dietary shift.
I know.
Going from meticulously having a single slice of breakfast bread to suddenly experiencing irregular steak dinners, the contrast is immense.
The author describes the motivation behind this deployment of funds so beautifully. They write that they wanted to see if, quote, a little color returns to the impoverished, scraped by life.
That specific word, color, is incredibly evocative.
It really is.
Because the duct tape, the flimsy plastic, the thin milk, the constant size, that all constitutes a gray life. A life entirely devoid of spontaneity and simple pleasures.
Deploying the 9,300 yen on steak dinners was a deliberate act of bringing the color back. It restored the joy of a shared, unrationed meal.
It feels like an unmitigated victory. They cracked the puzzle, they preserved the mother's joy, they alleviated the crushing financial friction, and they manifested steak dinners out of thin air just by smoking the whole cigarette.
It is the perfect, quirky, happy ending to a really stressful budgeting saga.
It would be a perfect ending. But human relationships are rarely so tidy.
Oh, they aren't.
Because immediately after the author describes the triumphant return of color in the steak dinners, the tone of the text undergoes a massive, devastating shift.
It is genuinely jarring when you read it. The author drops this massive piece of personal context right into the middle of this triumph, and they do it with almost zero buildup.
Yeah, it just comes out of nowhere.
They reveal that this era of shared family problem-solving, the teamwork required to execute the reversal technique, it is entirely in the past.
The author writes, with just blunt efficiency, quote, after becoming estranged.
After everything we just discussed. After the shared trauma of the half tissues, the micromanaged toilet spray, the desperate data collection in the ashtrays to save the family unit.
The author is no longer on speaking terms with their parents. They have suffered a complete falling out.
We are not given the details of the rupture. The text offers no explanation for why the estrangement occurred, and we can only analyze the facts presented in the document. But the sudden introduction of this estrangement forces the reader to completely reevaluate the emotional architecture of the entire narrative.
It changes everything. You suddenly realize that this incredibly detailed, empathetic, almost loving account of their family's financial struggle is not a current event at all.
It's a memory.
Yes, it is a memory being analyzed from a profound distance.
And yet, what is truly fascinating is that despite the familial falling out, the author maintains a distant, analytical watch over the economic system they built. They note that even though they are estranged and absent from the home, quote, the parents' eating out continues.
The system survived the rupture.
It did. The reversal technique remains active. The parents are still utilizing that 9,300 yen in monthly savings to go out and experience the color of life.
But then the author adds one final layer of mathematical analysis to the situation. And it is arguably the most poignant calculation in the entire text.
The author notes that because they are no longer a physical part of the family unit, because they have been formally, quote, omitted from the household, their own personal food expenses are no longer drawing from the parents' limited budget.
They write, quote, my omitted food expenses are further saved.
By not existing in their parents' daily lives, the author is technically improving their parents' financial standing.
The parents now possess the 9,300 yen from the cigarette savings, plus the capital they are no longer spending to feed their estranged child.
Which culminates in what is undeniably the most emotionally complex sentence in the entire blog post. The author synthesizes this new reality, the parents enjoying their meals out, the extra capital generated by their own absence, and they write, quote, "Fine with the premise I was never born, I am happy as a ghost watching their happy figures."
I am happy as a ghost. We really have to stop and examine the weight of that statement.
It completely elevates the source material. What began as a clever, slightly eccentric life hack about optimizing tobacco consumption transforms into a profound meditation on unconditional, sacrificial love, delivered from a state of total exile.
The author is embracing a truly radical philosophy of care here.
They are essentially communicating to their parents, you can treat me as if I never existed. You can operate under the premise that I was never born, but I know that I engineered the system that allows you to eat steak.
I found the unburned fuel.
Mhm.
I located the 9,300 yen.
And even if I am entirely invisible to you now, even if my status in this family is literally that of a ghost, I extract my happiness purely from the knowledge that you are happy and secure.
It requires a remarkable relinquishing of ego. I mean, most individuals, if they had engineered a solution that pulled their family out of a gray, impoverished existence, would demand acknowledgement.
They would want a medal.
They would insist on sitting at the table to consume the steak they mathematically generated. But this author completely accepts their erasure.
They find their fulfillment not in active participation or gratitude, but in silent observation. They watch their happy figures from afar, and they declare that it is enough.
It is a beautiful, bittersweet image. It is as if the author meticulously built a complex clock, wound it up so it would keep perfect time, and then just walked out the front door forever. Taking solace in the fact that the clock is still ticking for the people inside, even if those people never once look at the maker's mark.
This self-assigned identity is fully embraced at the conclusion of the text. When the author signs off, they write, quote, "That's all, the ghost's saving technique."
They even append a small ghost emoji to the text.
They really do. They have completely adopted this persona, accepting that their enduring legacy within that household is not as a present recognized child, but as an invisible mathematical benefactor who permanently optimized the tobacco budget.
Which brings us to the author's final message directly to you, the reader. After guiding us through this immense emotional and financial roller coaster, they smoothly transition back to being a practical, helpful guide.
They offer a direct call to action based entirely on their own journey.
They reiterate the core math of the technique one final time for the reader's benefit. 600 yen multiplied by 31 days equals 18,600 yen, divided by 2 equals 9,300 yen saved.
And then they issue an instruction on how to utilize that capital. They write, quote, "Please do something fun with the saved 9,300 yen. You must have pent-up stress."
It is a deeply empathetic conclusion.
It is.
The author understands that anyone reading a detailed blog post about cutting tissues in half and auditing cigarette butts is likely experiencing their own significant financial anxieties. They acknowledge the reader's stress.
And crucially, they do not advise the reader to be responsible. They don't say, take the 9,300 yen and pay your utility bill or put it in a mutual fund. They explicitly say, do something fun.
They want the reader to find their own equivalent of the irregular steak dinner. They want the reader to systematically extract the color back into their own lives, exactly as they engineered for their parents.
It reinforces the author's overarching thesis. The ultimate purpose of budgeting and systems analysis isn't merely to survive a gray existence. It is to actively carve out pockets of joy, even when operating under severe restrictions.
And then, almost as a casual afterthought, the author drops one final, wonderful postscript. After providing a literal masterclass on how to financially accommodate a smoking habit without destroying a household, they add a single concluding sentence.
Trying to quit smoking with the saved money is also good.
It is a perfect, subtle acknowledgement of reality. While the entire document was dedicated to optimizing and accommodating the habit, the author lightly concedes that utilizing the newly found financial breathing room to escape the habit altogether is perhaps the most logical victory of all.
It's as if the ghost is whispering, look, I showed you the exact math to survive the king of luxury goods. But if you want to use that capital to overthrow the king entirely, I fully support that decision too.
He is practical, utterly non-judgmental, and it perfectly encapsulates the complex, pragmatic empathy that defines this entire story.
It is a genuinely masterful piece of writing. The author seamlessly weaves together forensic financial systems analysis, deep behavioral observation, and profound personal melancholy into a highly coherent narrative about how humans assign value and what we are willing to endure to protect the things and the people we love.
It absolutely forces you to look at every single item in your own physical space differently. It makes you question the hidden opportunity costs around you and wonder what you might be silently sacrificing to maintain your own status quo.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question directly inspired by our ghost author's methodology. Think about the areas in your own life where you feel a constant friction, where you feel forced to choose between a beloved luxury and your basic daily comfort.
Are there systems in your life where you are throwing away half the tobacco without even realizing it?
We are often conditioned to believe that the only way to balance our ledgers is through painful elimination, that we must cut out the things we love entirely.
But could looking closer at the physical waste within your own habits, identifying the unburned fuel escaping your own king of luxury goods, actually be the mechanism that allows you to afford them, without ever having to cut your morning toast in half?
Perhaps the solution to your bottleneck isn't to stop enjoying your life. Perhaps the solution is simply to ensure you are smoking all the way down to the filter. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.